In this video, I'll show you how to take long exposure pictures in the middle of the day using a 10-stop neutral density filter. Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and you're watching Adorama TV, brought to you by Adorama, the camera store that's got everything for us photographers. And today you join me in Venice, and I want to do a long exposure shot in the middle of the day using a 10-stop neutral density filter. The idea is that things that are moving become lovely and blurry, but the things that are static remain sharp. Now to do that, I think I need a shutter speed of about 30 seconds. And I can't just dial that into the camera and take a shot, because if I did, well, I'd end up with a really bright, overexposed picture. You see, normally we can control the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO to get our correct exposure. But there's actually 4 things that make up exposure. The 4th thing is, well, the sun, which you can't control unless you have a neutral density filter. That's its job. Think of it as perhaps a pair of sunglasses for your camera, and it makes a bit more sense. So to achieve this, the first thing you need to do is to get your camera on a stable platform. Now that might mean a tripod, but I'm traveling and I don't have a tripod with me, so I'm using my travel tripod, my little Gorillapod here. If you want to see how I stabilize my camera without a tripod, check out my previous video on the Adorama Learning Center. Next thing to do is to set the composure of your shot. How do you want to frame it? So in this case, I've got it framed, I've got it stable, I'm ready to go. I haven't put the filter on, notice, because there's one more thing to do, that's to figure out the exposure. Now there's a reason I'm using a 10-stop neutral density rather than anything else. It's because the maths on it is really simple and straightforward. I'm looking for a magic shutter speed of 1/30th of a second without the filter. To get there, I can adjust my ISO and my aperture. In this case, my ISO is as low as it will go, 100, and my aperture is f/16. Now with that in place, my non-filtered exposure is a 30th of a second. With a 10-stop neutral density filter, a 30th of a second becomes 30 seconds. It's really easy to work out. A 15th of a second is a minute. 60th of a second is 15 seconds. Now there's some apps on your phone which will help you figure this out if that gets a bit more complicated and you need other settings. But remember, it's really simple. 10-stop neutral density filter, 30th of a second equals 30 full seconds with the filter in place. Right, so I've got my exposure set. Next thing to do is, well, not put the filter on. One more thing to do, focusing. My Olympus will actually focus through the filter just fine, but not every camera will. And if that's the case with your camera, you might want to put it into manual focus and pre-focus before you actually put the filter in place. Okay, so with everything set, let's pop the filter on. Now I'm using a Hoya 10-stop neutral density filter. It's a round one that screws on the front. I like to use these when I'm traveling because, well, the round metal outside means that it has a bit of protection. You can also get square ones. They work just as well. Lee filters make an excellent 10-stop neutral density filter. So now you're ready to take your shots, but hang on a second. You don't want to just press the shutter, because if you do, you're going to get a little bit of camera shake. And even though it's a long exposure, that tiny bit of camera shake will ruin your picture. So you've got to trigger this remotely somehow without touching the camera. That might mean a remote release cable or an app on your phone in my case. Or if you don't have either, then pop it into its self-timer mode. I've got it on 2-second self-timer, so when I press the shutter, there's 2 seconds whilst the camera stabilizes and the shot starts. You might also want to try using something like the mirror lock function to avoid any mirror slap, as it's called, or if you're using a mirrorless camera, you can put it in its silent shutter mode to, again, minimize any shake in your shots. So there's one more thing to talk about, and that's white balance. These really dark neutral density filters will give a color shift. They all do to some extent or another, and that means I need to get my white balance set either correctly in camera by trial and error, or if you're shooting like me in RAW, it's something that you can fix when you go back to your computer back home. And there you go, the Grand Canal is free of boats. We can see a little bit of blur, which is nice. The water's blurry, but the buildings are nice and sharp. So what are you going to do when you've taken a shot? Well, the very next thing to do is to take another shot, because anything could blur this, just the slightest little bit of movement. It's always a good idea to have a second picture. It takes 30 seconds, but it's time well spent. Once you've done that, well, then go and take some more, which is exactly what I'm going to do right now. So let's head out onto the streets of Venice and I'll go take some more long exposure pictures. Might as well come with me. I'm using a mirrorless camera, but if you're a DSLR user, remember to cover your viewfinder on long exposure shots. Not every camera has it, but if your camera or lens has image stabilization, it's probably a good idea to switch that off on long exposure shots. So with the weather starting to change and the light fading, it's a great time to bring a halt to the shooting with the 10-stop neutral density filter. Now I'm really glad I brought this to Venice. It's created some very different pictures of a truly iconic city. Now if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave me a comment below. And if you want to see more videos from myself and the other amazing presenters right here on Adorama TV, you know what you've got to do. You've got to click on that subscribe button. I'm Gavin Hoey. Thanks for watching.